Your alternative talk radio contact, The Planet, KGRAradio.com.
With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Into the Fray. I am, of course, your host, Shannon LeGros. Before we get to my chat with Tony, I would like to say hello to some of my new patrons over at Patreon.com. Joe, Chris, Tommy, Heather, Tim, Ty, Pete, Mike, Carrie, Mrs. Jones, Charles, Mr. Bowles, Eric, Bill, Winston, Elaine, George, Rob, Molly, Tanya, Tanner, GJ, Katie, and Lisa. And if you are interested in getting extra content, including both audio and video, head to patreon.com and search Into the Fray. Along with those new patrons, just a heads up on some of the newest episodes up for patrons only. These include The Giant White Beast of Coco Nino, The Creatures and Strange Visitors of Skinwalker Ranch and the Uinta Basin, Mexico, Cryptids, Spirits, and the Devil himself, Bigfoot of the Brown Property of Washington State, which is, of course, the entire chat with John Brown. He is the owner of the property, along with Sarah Brown. Chatted about my time there from some years ago. There are nearly 80 exclusive audio and video episodes, along with some of the physical extras that you can get over at Patreon. And now, without further ado, here is my chat with Tony. So first of all, Tony, we've been trying to do this, no fault of yours, mine though, for quite a while. So thanks for, being patient with that. And second of all, you're one of my patron members over at patreon.com. Thank you so much. And I remember when you sent me the drawing, right, that you did really quickly about the house that you said was, I think one of your quotes was, it was a nightmare, basically, right? Like that's
we
kind
can talk
of
about
the
the
big
house,
thing.
but not my drawings.
No, we don't need to talk about the drawings. I don't want to talk about any drawings I've ever done either. So don't you worry about that. And I won't share them either. That's just between us. No. But so you've got those experiences, of course, and then you also have which I'm interested to hear this, the Doppelganger story, and then you say you have maybe a couple UFO things going on. So I don't know where you wanted to start, but you can take the reins and steer the ship, or the horse. I suppose if I said reins, it would be a horse. So let's go with, steer the carriage with the horses.
Well, we can always we can start small and go big.
I like that. Let's do that. Let's start small, go big.
So the smallest one, I would say, would probably be the Doppelganger. My mom died whenever I was 15. And my sister always said this weird thing. My sister was 5 years older than me. And she always said this weird thing to me is, I don't think Mom's really dead. But I know for a fact I saw her in the hospital hours before she passed. And, it was like, but this thing, it's, that hope. What if she's right? Type of thing. Even though you think logically it's not realistic. But it was a few years later, I joined the Air Force. I was stationed at Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado. And I was out at Cherry Creek Mall. It's like a high-end mall in a nice suburb of Colorado. And I was crossing the street, and I saw my mom. And, of course, you look, and you're like, wow, that looks like my mom. No, that's my mom. It's kind of one of those things to where you know who somebody is. It can't be anybody else. It's not somebody that looks like them. It's not somebody that resembles. That was my mom. I knew for a fact that was my mom. And I ran across the street, and she walked into the mall. And it was kind of a different mall, not really the strip malls that most people think of. It's in kind of an indoor mall in a business area downtown. And I ran into that mall, and I looked around for probably 20 minutes, and I never saw her again. But I know for a fact that that was my mom. So that's kind of the first little story.
Was she even wearing clothes that your mother might have worn?
Yes. She was wearing cut-off shorts, and she was wearing a white blouse top. Hair was the same way. Everything was the same. And that's what kind of spurred me to run across the street through traffic, because that was my mom. You can, like I said, you can see people that look like people. You can see people that, oh my God, you two look alike, but you know the difference between the two people.
That must have been really jolting to you, especially after losing her at such a young age. You were 12, right? I mean, that must have been really emotional.
Well, see, it's you kind of got to look at it in two different ways. At the time, I was like, oh my God, that's my mom, and I do have relatives in Denver, actually famous relatives. We won't get into that, but I do have relatives there. And I was like, well, maybe she might be in Denver if she was still alive. So it was kind of like a bittersweet. I didn't catch up to her, and I didn't get to really see who it really was, if it was my mom or, just a doppelganger. We're supposed to have, 6 doppelgangers in the world? So maybe it was one of those people. But the mannerisms, the way she walked, it was just kind of, so it was kind of bittersweet. Like I said, I didn't get to see really who it was, but on the same token, if it was my mom and she was still alive, we're all good.
But you kind of hinted that she may be alive, at least at the time, that she might be alive, and then she wouldn't tell you about it?
See, and it goes back to my childhood. I was raised in Italy, and my father left us. We had 3 children. I had an older brother who had passed at 18, later. And I had my sister, who I still have, and it was the 3 of us. My father had walked out on us. And my mom had to move back to the States. And at the time, she had to give me to friends of the family, under the guise of, I'm unofficially adopting him to you. He's yours.
Right.
Just so she can make do. Later on, she got remarried. Her life turned around, and she came back. My brother had passed. So she came back and got me, and we moved. So it's kind of like one of those things that she was capable of doing that tomfoolery over 3 years. What else would she be capable of?
Right.
Would she be, but it's logically, it doesn't make sense to me. I sat there, she had ovarian cancer. I saw her condition, the evening that she died and what have you. It was like 2 hours after I'd seen her. But, logically, it doesn't make sense. But, with your heart, it's hard to give up.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
That was basically the doppelganger.
Yeah, see, I wasn't expecting that whole part where you said, it may have actually been her. And I'm like, wait, what? Not deceased kind of a thing.
Well, I had listened to another podcast where somebody was talking about the same thing. Mm-hmm. And they kind of said the same kind of scenario to where, you can hold somebody's hand that looks exactly like somebody you know, but it's not the same as holding the hand of that person.
Right.
You know that, and at that time, and what I saw was my mother. I mean, it was my mother. The hair was the same, the way she walked, her clothes, everything was the same. I don't think, there was no reason for it to be some kind of ghost in Denver whenever we lived in Pittsburgh. Why would a ghost travel to Denver? That's even more illogical. So what was it?
Did
And
that person see you at all, or was it at quite a distance? And
No. It wasn't even that far. It was probably a 4-lane road. It was a downtown road, maybe 4 lanes. And they were totally oblivious to me or anything I may be doing. They didn't see me. So, but like I said, it was enough to trigger me to chase after. So you can take it for what it is. It could have been, somebody that was her doppelganger or, what have you. But
right.
to me, it was. But it definitely left an impact, and I still think about it.
No, I'm sure. Probably
stays
still
in the back of my head.
Yeah, just kind of head on a swivel, just in case you need to chase after another one, another doppelganger again, right?
Well, that would be pretty cool. Now that I'm a little bit older, I'm a little bit wiser. I might handle it a little bit differently. So that would definitely be interesting.
How so?
I know more about it now. I've done more research into the paranormal, with the occult, what have you. And I just think I would have maybe been a little bit more diligent. Maybe, like I said, I'm ex-military, I'm ex-law enforcement. Maybe I would have pursued her in a different way. Maybe circled around the front, tried to cut her off instead of chasing after her. Just little things. Little things come with age and wisdom.
Right. Well, what's the next biggest thing?
Well, I was in my early teens. I think my early teens, maybe tween, somewhere around there. I can't remember the exact year. But my dad and I fished together all the time. And we enjoyed our night fishing, midnight, 2 a.m. And, because the fish bite better during that time. And we had taken a trip up to Canada. And I could not tell you where we were now. This is 30 years ago, 35 years ago. I can't tell you where we were, what lake we're on or anything, but I can tell you that it was a huge lake. The sky was crystal clear. It was nothing but stars and sky. We weren't near any large cities, there was no light shine from anything, just us. And we're out on this lake. And I don't know what it was, but we both looked up at the same time. And I couldn't tell you how far away this was. It was probably fairly far, and more than a mile, or maybe a mile at least. And we both looked up in the sky, and we saw a bright light. And the bright light just kind of sat there. We just kind of looked at it. Didn't look like a star. Didn't look like an aircraft. It wasn't twinkling. It was a bright, steady white. And we just kind of watched it for a second. And next thing you know, it shot straight off at a 90-degree angle to the left. And in an instant, snap your fingers, it was there. And judging by the distance it was away from us, it moved a considerable distance within, a split second. So we just kind of looked at each other, didn't say a word, still watched it, and it shot to the right. And it did this for probably a good minute and a half. And we never said a word about this to each other. We're just kind of watching it. And it stopped, hovered for maybe, 3 seconds, and just shot straight up into the sky and disappeared. We just looked at each other, not a word said, went right back to fishing. Kind of like one of those moments where you're just like,
Right. And like, what do you say, right? You're kind of like,
yeah,
okay,
what do you
let's
say?
just fish now.
Yeah, that's not a conventional aircraft. That's not some, lightning bug that's, 30 feet away. That was something. We both saw it. We both acknowledged it. We just never talked about it.
Never again after either.
Never again. My dad is 84. We have never talked about it. He is the old school, like whenever we're going to speak about my house, he's the old school, will never admit anything.
Right.
Everything has to have some kind of reason. It never happened, or it never happened.
Even if he's the librarian in Ghostbusters in the basement, and and he has that screaming thing in his face, right? Like even then, he'd be like, "Well, it was swamp gas." I mean, it's something very explainable.
Yeah, he will never break down to admit anything. And
Right.
It's funny because my mom would talk to us about it, and my sister and I would discuss this. We still do, and we know it happened. But he will not, if you approach him about it, he'll just say, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
One of those types. And it's kind of infuriating and frustrating, because he's like kind of the glue that holds everything together, but he won't, involve himself. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't remember that. And now he's at an age, maybe he doesn't. But if we were to move on, I spoke to you guys before whenever we did our little insiders thing, the little video thing about the thing in Vegas, down in your area. Yeah, do you remember me speaking about how we woke up at like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yes.
And we just felt presence? Yeah, that was a very, very... I've never had that happen before, even in the house I lived in. And I never had it happen again. I lived in Wilson Square, which I told you. It's a really small apartment complex by the convention center, and it's only maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 8 buildings, large buildings. 4 apartments per building, 4 large apartments. But it's not a very big thing, and so we all knew each other fairly well. And that one night, I mean, we just woke up. It was 2:33 in the morning, and I just felt something bad. Something bad beyond anything I've ever felt in my life. It was bad. And I grabbed a weapon. My ex-girlfriend, my daughter's mother, she woke up. She felt it too. We kind of started moving around the house, and we started noticing lights going on throughout the apartment complex. Like everybody's lights were turning on at the same time. It probably lasted about 15, 20 minutes, maybe. And then it just went away. I mean, just completely went away, just disappeared.
And then the lights started to go off?
What's that?
And then the lights started to go off again in the whole complex?
Yeah, everyone just started chilling out again.
What the hell was that about?
And see, that's my thing, is what the hell was that? Because, I mean, what would have enough negative energy to wake an entire apartment complex up?
Right.
At the same, so the next day I went to my neighbors. I went around and, was speaking to my neighbors, and they were like, yeah, we thought there was a prowler or somebody, out there. We actually called the cops and, what have you, and said, we feel like somebody's outside. Cops never showed up, of course. Middle of Las Vegas, down toward the convention center, nobody cares. But yeah, it's we all discussed it, the next day, and they all felt kind of the same thing. A threatening presence that was like overwhelming enough to wake you up out of sleep.
Yeah,
but nothing happened.
That's a really creepy story. And how long had you guys, lived there total?
We maybe only lived there for about a year. It was kind of like a transitional period.
Mm-hmm. And it was just the once that this happened, right?
It was only once. Like I said, I mean, I'm 48 years old, and I've never in my life experienced that feeling.
And you didn't see anything in the news, like somebody had, been murdered there that night or died there,
Nothing.
Anything weird?
I probably didn't, investigate to that point. I mainly just talked to my neighbors, and got the fact that they felt the same. They felt the same thing. It woke them up. They thought there was somebody outside, some kind of intruder. They felt threatened. what have you. But I mean, what possibly could have that much energy, to wake up 30 people?
Right. Well, and you're trained, like you said, you're military, you're law enforcement, and you decided to grab your weapon. For you to really want to grab that on top of, okay, let's get up, let's see what this is, let me arm myself. That's really saying something because you're trained to do so, and you thought it warranted that.
Yeah, at the time I wasn't. That was before my law enforcement stint. But still, I mean, I had my military training, I had
Right.
my common sense, and for something to, you know, trigger that kind of emotion in me to where you have to get armed and you have to get ready, because something bad's coming,
Right.
it was pretty substantial.
That's really weird. And I like those one-off stories because it's hard to label that. What do you even label that under?
And that was my thing. I don't remember. I don't know if you remember me asking that question. But I was
Yeah,
like,
I do. Yeah, that's why
what could that be?
that's why it'll be cool that this will finally air on, the main show. Obviously it'll get out to a few more people, and if anybody has any similar experiences, Tony and I would certainly like to hear about them.
Absolutely. Because like I said, that was a one-off of my life of, a bunch of weird things. And that literally was probably between the military, law enforcement, everything else I've done in my life, being on the streets, what have you, that was probably one of the most terrifying moments. And for no valid reason.
Right.
There was no visible threat. It was just some kind of intuition that told me that, something bad is here.
Well, yeah, and if anybody has any input on that or a similar experience or even have heard of anything close to that, please get in touch with me because we would both like to know about that. Well, where are we going next, Tony?
Where can we go next? We can go to the second possible UFO. And that would actually be in the house that I grew up in, which is the Bat House that we're going to speak about. But just to give you a little visual on how, everything's set up, our staircase to the upstairs was actually in between my bedroom and my sister's bedroom. So the staircase was to the upstairs was in between our bedrooms. Directly at the top of the staircase ahead was the master bedroom where my parents were. If you're standing on the staircase to the right of that, would have been my dad's den. And to the right of that was the bathroom. And one night, we're laying there. So the picture I'm pointing is my sister's room and my room. We're on the same side of the house, but divided by stairs. So one night it was, God, now we're really reaching back to my childhood. So what time at night, I couldn't tell you, but it was late. It was the morning hours. And just to give you an idea, I lived on a hill in rural Pennsylvania to where you might see 6 cars in a day travel on my road. And I lived at the top of that hill. And we would sometimes get, headlights shining through the windows coming up the hill. And it was very common. You knew what it was. It wasn't very common. It's just you knew what it was whenever you saw it. It was just headlights. One night, I woke up and I see this bright orange. I don't know. I kind of want to say flames because that's the only thing I could think of that would be bright orange. Kind of like a campfire type thing. And it shot past my window toward my sister's room. And I mean, I sat bolt upright in bed. In the middle of the morning, I was like, holy shit, what was that? I'm sorry if I cuss. I'm trying to keep it down to a minimum.
No, you're fine.
And, so I ran around, through the hallway into my sister's room. She's sitting bolt upright in bed. I was like, did you see that? And she was like, yeah, I saw that. She's like, why do you think I'm awake? I'm like, what the hell was that? She's like, I don't know. I was like, what did you see? And she's like, I saw something look like fire shoot past my windows. She had 2 windows in her room on that side. I had 1 window. She said, I saw fire shoot past my windows. So, we tentatively go over to our windows and we look outside. There's nothing. No comets, no fireballs, no asteroids, no meteorites, nothing outside. And like I had said, we have seen car lights many times over the years of living at that house. This was different. This woke us up, and we both saw the same thing. We both described the same thing. It looked like a fireball or something, bright orange, shooting past our windows. But there was nothing outside.
Well, and of course, the fact that you're on a hill, you're pointing that out, because if you're not on a hill and the lights are coming directly in your window, then it could be easier to explain away. But you're on a hill, and if it's some kind of light refraction, it shouldn't look the way that it did when it went by, right?
Well, because we sat on the hill and our bedrooms were in the second story. So basically, if somebody was driving up the hill, sometimes their headlights would shine. If they had their brights on, they would shine into your room.
Mm-hmm.
And we were used to that, and this was something different. It never woke us up. I mean, you might see it before you went to sleep or what have you, but while you were sleeping, there was never anything bright enough to actually wake us both up.
Well, and bright orange is kind of a strange headlight color.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is it was orange. I know for a fact it was orange. And she said the same exact thing, that she saw an orange fireball go past her window. So is that a UFO? What the hell was that?
Right. Well, and it probably was a relief that, because you described it as bright orange, like flames, and then she goes in, not only is she awake, but she describes the exact same thing. You're probably like, oh, holy crap.
And that just made it better and worse at the same time.
Right.
Now you have something unexplainable that woke you up in the middle of the night, and now you have verification that it was there. But there's no physical evidence or trace of it.
Right. I mean, you said that this was in the quote-unquote bad house, right?
Yes.
So was this like the very first event in the bad house?
Timeline-wise, probably not. Because I had been experiencing, I think I moved into that house, I was about 5.5 whenever we moved into that house. And I'm pretty sure, my sister's 5 years older than me, and I'm pretty sure she was somewhere in her teens whenever that happened.
So what's the history then on the bad house? How much do you know about it? How long had it been there when you guys moved in?
The estimates were over 200 years old. There's no history on it whatsoever. Whenever you go up into the attic, there was literally a thatched roof.
Oh, man.
The roof that we had whenever we lived there was slate. We never had like a shingle roof or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was a slate roof, which actually dates the place as it is. And from what I remember being a child is going up into the attic, I could swear it was like some kind of thatch. I mean, I could be wrong. Could have been some kind of wood that was falling apart or shredded up. I don't know. But there's no actual history on the house, like buy-sell history, who was there, anything.
Mm.
The house had a cistern.
Had a cistern?
Yeah, it had a cistern, and we used that cistern for many, many years, probably nearly almost until we moved out. So, I mean, we had to have water, brought in by truck to have fresh water. It had a coal cellar, separate from the basement, to where people would come and deliver coal to feed the furnace. It was old.
Man, that's a legit old house. And it was definitely over 200 years old.
I mean, just from the telltale signs, I mean, if it's got a slate roof, it's got some kind of wooden or thatched roof underneath. I mean, it has a cistern. I mean, how old does that date the house? I probably should have done more research on exactly how old the place was. But where I grew up, it's called Mount Pleasant. And, I mean, it's been around since the 1600s. So, I mean, take your guess. Was
Mount
it
Pleasant.
something
Why
old
does
built
that
upon?
sound familiar? Mount Pleasant.
What's that?
Why does Mount Pleasant sound familiar? For some other
It's
reason.
the old Helltown legend. My friend made a brewery called Helltown Brewery. It's the old Helltown legends. Back during the 1700s, whenever there was the trying to remember the years, it had something to do with alcohol prohibition, but it wasn't like the 1900s alcohol prohibition. It was before that, back whenever they had tariffs and, stuff like that. And basically, the farmers, Mount Pleasant was built on farms around the central city, and that's what made it important. Was people traveled from New York City down to Virginia and what have you during the colonial days through Mount Pleasant, because it was easy travel and it had all the farms. It had all kinds of supplies. And basically, whenever it got into the whole alcohol and whiskey situation, the farmers and the people, the brewers of Mount Pleasant, stood up against the local government. And it turned into like a bloodbath over the alcohol. And that's why it was called Helltown.
Well, that's a good recipe for other things to go on around there, right?
Yeah, it's not due to like, the number of the beast or anything else.
Right.
It's kind of, okay. It was the late 1700s. Now it's starting to come back to me a little bit. It was the late 1700s, whenever the Great Whiskey Rebellion thing was going on. And Mount Pleasant actually stood up to the government during the late 1700s against the whiskey thing, because, that's how Mount Pleasant made a lot of money, because, it was all built on farms and grains and stuff like that, and people were brewing whiskey. And the government came in because, they wanted to tax it, what have you, and it turned into this big bloody war. That's pretty much where Helltown came from. But like I said, the town has a huge history. My area, Mount Pleasant, was actually, it was an Indian crossroad. And it was during even pre-Revolutionary War. It was kind of one of the first settlements and first areas on the East Coast that, allowed travelers to move west. So it was actually an Indian town at one point.
All right.
So, I mean, that kind of gives you an idea. If it was pre-Revolutionary War, the Revolutionary War was, 1775, of course. So we're talking, early 1700s. You were asking me about dating the house.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? I mean, that's a freaking old house.
That's so cool, though. When you're talking about, you got Indians and you got Prohibition. That's cool. That's a lot of history.
Exactly. And there was a big bloody war, fought on a thing. What we did do whenever I was kids, we kind of looked up the topography of the area, and I can't verify this. So, I'll call my own bullshit on it. But I could swear that we found some kind of old maps that showed my hill as named Demon Hill.
Oh, boy. Well, hey, now.
It could be just fantasy for me, that I found this or what have you. But honestly, I do kind of remember us going back and looking through maps and finding Demon Hill. And the best part of where I grew up is, I believe I told you before, was the zip code. Why I may not be religious. The zip code is 15666.
Well, I think I just found the episode title. Whether it's true or not, I don't really give a crap. That's just amazing. Demon Hill 15666.
Yeah, and that's that kind of goes into feeding into the entry into my story. Is at least two of my neighbors were practicing witches.
Now, to what level do you mean practicing witches? And are you talking white witch or the dark kind?
No, not good. Not good. They would have my neighbors directly across the street. I'm not going to get into names. I still remember their names, trust me. And they would have nights where 8 truckloads of guys would come over to their house. And they would do whatever they were doing. Can't see it. I can't say what they were doing.
And the men would leave in the morning or that same night?
What's that?
The men would leave that the next morning, or during that same night, truckloads would come back and they would get in and leave.
I don't recall. All I know is, I mean, they were going in the morning whenever we would wake up for school or what have you.
They would be leaving without their testicles, is what you're saying.
I don't know. I mean, the thing is, they would have just these bunch of guys coming over all the time.
Female witches, right? We're talking females.
There was the mother, 2 daughters, and the grandma.
Oh, Jesus.
There was no male ever lived in that house.
Come on.
The entire time there.
Ew, what's going on, Tony?
So it's kind of one of those things, now, back then, you're a kid, you don't think about that shit.
Right.
You know what I mean? But now you look back and you're like, you got a household full of women. None of them had a relationship, so.
Yeah, no husband you could see, no boyfriends. It was
there was
the
never.
transient men.
I went to school. No, I went to school with the 2 daughters, my sister and I.
Well, what were they like?
Terrible. My sister is kind of she'll say stuff, but she won't do anything type person. I have always been the little guy that will say, you know what, let's go. And those girls tortured my sister. Just tortured her. I don't know why. There was no actual reason. I mean, there was no interactions between us that would create bad blood that I knew about. But I mean, you're talking teenage girls, so there you go. That's beyond anybody's comprehension.
Did they look different than the other girls in school, or
No. I mean, they looked like typical teenage girls. But they always had this hatred of my family and my sister. And I was the type, I broke the one girl's nose with a math book on a bus for picking on my sister. And this is not things I'm proud of at this point in my life. I was just a kid. I was not even a tween, I'm talking 9, 10 years old. They chased us down on their bikes, and they pushed my sister over a little hill, an embankment on her bike. And I had a Coca-Cola bottle in my hand, and I hit the one girl with it. They were always torturing my sister. And there was no real reason for it. My sister wasn't hated in high school. She wasn't dysfunctional. She wasn't, some kind of outcast, some kind of nerd. She was always kind of in the kind of cool clique. But these girls just nonstop torture my sister.
So as far as the truckloads of men, you saw them show up.
Mm-hmm. They would go in the house.
And
the house was always dark. Whether it was due to no lights on or whether it was due to blackout curtains or what have you, the house was always dark. It was never like the lights were on. They actually had a pool out back. It was never like some kind of party. There was never any noise, never any commotion. It wasn't like people were hanging out, drinking, having a good time. Some kind of celebration.
And you never see them leave. You never once saw one single guy leave the house to go back to wherever he came from.
No, I was a child. I didn't care, what went on over there. It wasn't my concern. It didn't matter to me. But I would wake up the next day and the driveway would have 1 or 2 cars.
But when they're showing up, you said truckload. So one dude was driving and he had 3 more guys in the truck, and that was one truck. And then another truck would come by at another point in time, or it was just like a convoy and they'd all unload at the same time?
I would really have to start to think about that. You would just kind of notice people start pulling in.
Okay.
Type thing.
Right.
And we lived, like I said, we lived in rural Pennsylvania, so their driveway was probably, 60, 70 feet, which can accommodate, quite a few vehicles.
Right.
And I would have to, I'm not going to sit there and put myself out there and say, oh, this is what it is, but I would probably say at least 3-4 trucks.
How far away were you? Could you tell if they were younger guys or older guys?
Never paid that much attention, to be honest. We were literally right across a almost 1-lane street. It was a paved road, but it was literally one of those things where you kind of have to drive on the shoulder to get around somebody coming the other direction.
Right.
So, we're close. And our house, I would say our garage was probably 30 feet from our house. We had a detached garage. We had 10 acres. So, we had a little bit of property. And we had a detached garage, maybe 30 feet from the house, 40 feet. And that sat almost directly across the street from their house, if that makes sense.
So that's
well, we weren't far, but we weren't
right.
next door. It's
well, and as you said,
living.
You were younger. It's not like you were trying to you weren't thinking in the same mindset you would be now if you had neighbors that were doing that sort of thing. So you said that you had 2 neighbors that were practicing witchcraft. What are the other neighbors? What's their situation? Where are they at?
They were a little bit more they were probably about halfway down the hill. I remember their names too. And they didn't have kids. And they actually said something about witchcraft to us
What
at
did they
one
say?
point. Because we were talking about the neighbors up the hill. And they said, they're like, maybe we're all witches.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the last time we spoke to them. And you're talking about a place where, nobody moves. It's not like a rental area. It's not like, a high, moving area like kind of Vegas. It's the people that are there have been there for a long time. Nobody moves type deal.
Maybe we're all witches. That's what they said.
Yeah, they said maybe we're all witches. Because I remember my sister and I, we were coming up the hill and they were outside, and I that's the day we had the altercation where I hit the one neighbor with the Coca-Cola bottle. We were coming from my friend's house, and whenever I say coming from my friend's house, my friend lived like a half a mile away, so it was always we had to take bikes and travel. They had followed us, and that's where the altercation occurred. And we were on our way back up the hill, and they were like, "Oh, what's going on? Why you guys?" We're like, because the witch is up the street, decided to push my sister down the hill, and they looked at us and they said, maybe we're all witches on the street.
Whereas most people, if you mention the word witches, you say, oh, the witches pushed my sister down. They would go, witches? What are you talking about? What are you saying right now?
Yeah, pretty much like, what were you smoking?
Yeah, dude, whoa. Like you would be the weirdo instead of them going, oh, maybe we're all witches. And then you're like, oh, okay then. Yeah, I could see where you'd stop talking to them after that. So
yeah, they were in their middle age, just bad things happened on that hill. Just bad things.
Did you guys ever find any, and this, I may be asking this too soon, but did you ever find anything ever on anybody's property, not that you were trespassing, if you were, fine, or on your own, that was, weird animals that were dead, hanging from trees, any symbols on trees, any, rock formations, anything that may indicate stuff going on that they were taking inside the house and doing it outside on their properties or on your property?
No, it was, like I said, all the neighbors were kind of secretive. I would have to say, if I were to count quickly, on my hill, from bottom to top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, way back in the corner, 8, 9 people on my entire hill. 9 households. And nobody, one of my neighbors is actually our school bus driver. She lived down the other side of the hill. And she was really nice. But none of the other neighbors, we never really got along. You would think in a small situation like that everyone kind of talks and communicates and, what have you. But for the most part, maybe 2 or 3 out of the 9, 10 people actually spoke to one another. But we never, I traveled that I was a kid. I hunted and I fished and what have you. And I traversed that area. I was a country kid. I went through every field, went through every piece of woods, playing cowboys and Indians, doing whatever I was doing, and I never saw anything out of the ordinary.
So we've ascertained that your neighbors are a little different. So let's start talking about what was going on then inside the quote-unquote bad house.
The bad house. I believe probably one of the first memories there is, you just never felt alone in the house. No matter what room you went in, no matter who was in the house, whether they were near you, far away, you never felt alone. You always felt some kind of presence in that house near you, no matter what room you're in. Like, I would look behind couches. I would look around corners, because you just always felt that there was somebody there with you at all times. And, it wasn't always a good feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my first memories of that house was never feeling alone. Always feeling like there was something with you in every room. The second, I would say, progressing on from that is the pictures. We had pictures, like every other 80s family. We had pictures of the family up the stairwell. My passed on brother, grandmas, grandpas, uncles, aunts, stuff like that. And we would literally, my parents would get so mad because we would literally write on the pictures which way the eyes were facing whenever we went up the stairs. Because we were determined that those eyes were changing directions on those pictures. At this point in time, I can't remember whether we actually verified that the eyes were, I want to say they were, but, we used to get in a lot of trouble for marking on the pictures and stuff. But that was kind of one of my earliest memories was you would walk up the stairs and you always felt like something was watching. And you would always look over to the pictures. And of course, if you think something's watching you and you see pictures, you're going to think the pictures are watching you. So it was like one of the most eerie things in the world.
But looking back, do you feel like the eyes in the pictures were actually changing directions, or you maybe were just, a heightened sense of paranoia at the time and that's how you felt?
I honestly want to believe they were. I'm not going to put down any kind of like soul bets on it, but
right.
Honestly, I think because, like I said, we literally would mark the pictures.
Now, just you guys, you and your sister.
Me and my sister.
But the parents thought, stop it. You got to knock this off with this mark in the pictures thing.
My mom was never easy around the house. She was always off. She was always uncomfortable in the house. She had multiple fights. We were talking about the neighbors. She went after the witch neighbors with a coal shovel one day.
Mm.
Because they just, like I said, we just did not get along with them. And there was no reason for it. There was no rivalry. There was no, logical explanation to why two neighbors would have such a, it wasn't like we were stealing each other's cows, or something like that. It was just this hatred. It was a hatred between us and the neighbors.
But what warranted the coal shovel incident? What was that about? Do you know?
Them messing with my sister.
Okay. That makes sense.
My mom was a big lady. My mom is Italian. We were born in Italy. we don't play. You know, whenever it comes to family, game on.
Oh, yeah, you mess with, you know, a
You mess
kid.
with one, you mess with them all.
Yeah, it's not good. I could see that totally. Okay.
And my mom was a big lady. She was 5'8", and she probably weighed 250. And whenever I say that, you think of some, you know, overweight, sloppy person. We had a farm. My mom was a very, very strong woman. You know, she wasn't out of shape for her weight. You know, she was definitely overweight, but my mom would take care of business. That's basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, she
She would carry
probably
8
scared the
bales.
shit out of the neighbors there, and they deserved it from the sounds of it.
Yeah. And one day she just had enough. And I mean, she took the coal shovel, and I remember her running across the street, and they scattered.
Yeah.
My dad had to go over and, like, you know, but it was just the fact that my mom was never comfortable in that house. You know, she never talked about it, but she never came to me and my sister about anything, any of our concerns in a bad manner. Like, she didn't, you know, you guys are crazy.
Right.
You guys are imagining things. She never told us that, ever. She would just be like, well, it's okay. We're here now, blah, 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 you know. But it was never, what do I want to say? I'm trying to think of the word. She would never try to downplay
Right.
what was happening in the house.
Right.
She wouldn't talk about it, but she wouldn't downplay it. You know, where most parents would be like, you had a nightmare. You were watching a bad movie. You had a bad day.
It's all your
You know?
imagination.
Exactly. And she never, ever, ever did that to us. You know, which kind of makes you, you know, look back and be like, okay, well, shit was really going on.
Right.
You know, it's just, that's your parents' jobs. Your parents' job is to protect the children. You know this. You know what I mean? That's your job, protect children.
So
you know, you don't want to be telling them, oh, yeah, you know what? There's shit running around the house, and it's kind of crazy.
yeah.
You're not going to say that to your kids.
Right. No, because you don't want to scare them. I mean,
Exactly.
it's
But,
not, that
you
is
know,
the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do as a parent. So, no, I totally get that. So we got the pictures on the stairwell, and I'm assuming it progresses a little bit from there.
it started getting weird. I kind of remember, see, this is the weird thing, because I've actually researched this and I came up with different answers. But one point we had cardinals, the birds, attacking the house. And I remember my family saying, if a cardinal is attacking, you know, your house or trying to get in the windows or what have you, it means 3 people close to you are going to die. You know, I've actually researched this and I found nothing to corroborate that thing. I don't know if that's like some kind of old family thing or what have you, but I do distinctly remember that being said. And it got to the point where, you know, we put out tinfoil, because tinfoil, you know, we're talking pre-internet days. So, you know, you can't go on the internet and be like, what can I do to stop cardinals from attacking our house? Type deal. You know, so I guess some old wives' tale was put tinfoil up around the windows and it would keep the birds from attacking or coming into the windows. And we had actually done that. And the cardinals kept coming. And I do remember shortly after that, we had 2 aunts and a grandparent die within like a month.
Within a
Of
month?
that. Within a month.
That's kind of weird.
Yeah, and it's kind of like one of those things. Like I said, I've Googled this, I've looked it up, I've tried to corroborate, and you know, because I'm a logical person, you know. But the simple fact was, we really did what they said was 3 family members close to you will die. You know, if this happens, that's what I don't remember if it was my mom, my aunts, my grandma, whoever had said this, but we literally had 3 family members die within a month. And the Cardinals went away.
The Cardinals went away after the 3
They never came
deaths?
back. They never come back. We never had to put things up again. I remember specifically because in our dining room, I remember we had a big picture window in the dining room. And I remember the Cardinals, I mean, they would literally hit it to where you could hear them from watching TV in the living room.
So then wouldn't you have dead cardinals? Wouldn't they be breaking their necks?
They would be dead. They'd be out on the porch. You'd have to go get them. Throw them away.
Man, it's just like in the movie Dark Skies.
It's kind of like that. But it's just a different kind of bird. And like I said, I don't know where it came from, that it was, some kind of, old folklore. I tried to look up the folklore and I didn't find anything that said that. But that was what was passed on to me. That's what was said about the Cardinals. And I swear to you, after what happened, the Cardinals never came back. We never had a problem with Cardinals again.
That's weird.
Yeah, it's just really weird. And it's unexplainable. Then my sister had a friend. Her name was Joy. And one day Joy came over to the house. We had pine trees outside the house. We do in the southwest Pennsylvania. We have a lot of pine trees. We had these gigantic pine trees. And Joy was freaking out. And we were like, what the hell's going on? Why are you freaking out? Blah, blah, blah. My sister's freaking out. That's her best friend. They're teenagers, what have you. And she starts carving her name into her arm with a knife. And she ended up having to have stitches from this. But she starts carving her name into her arm with the knife. We're all freaking out. We're like, what the hell? You know what I mean? This girl's cutting herself and freaking out. And she said that she saw a baby floating on a cloud inside the pine tree with a noose around its neck. And that was her answer for freaking out.
Why would carving her own name into her arm be the solution or the reprieve for that? I don't understand.
Never any explanations whatsoever.
Oh,
I would say that my sister's contact with Joy was severely limited after that point.
I can understand that.
Yeah, my parents, they weren't really big on letting her hang out with her friend at that point. But yeah, I remember that girl, she was a bit different. I'm not going to say that she wasn't different than other people we knew. But I mean, she went to the point saying it was a baby on a silver-lined cloud hanging from a noose. And that was why she freaked out.
Those damn witches, that it's all the witches' fault.
Yeah, but it's like you sit there and you think about that picture. You know what I mean? And what is the purpose of that? If you're trying to freak somebody out, or if I would have saw that, I would have been like, okay, that's weird.
Right.
It wouldn't have caused me to etch into my skin with a knife.
So it was severe enough that she needed stitches.
Oh yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
What was she using?
A knife, a pocket knife.
Pocket knife. Where'd you get that?
Lord only knows. We lived on a farm.
That's true. Everybody carries a knife because you needed it.
We lived on a house full of guns and knives.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, no.
We hunted and fished for everything we ate, or else we grew it and killed it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. God. Oof.
So that was the Joy story. These were kind of the first stories that I remember, moving into the house. Now to elevate. You ready to start elevating?
Let's do it.
All right. So I was probably maybe 7 at the time, around 7. And I don't know I'm sure some of the listeners remember, we're going to date ourselves here. Back then, the bed frames weren't really high off the floor. You're talking 8 inches, maybe 6-8 inches off the floor. The old school bed frames, the metal bed frames that you put together and put the mattress on. They're fairly low. Well, one night I woke up, couldn't tell you what time, and I was under the bed. Couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Literally, the bed was sitting on my chest. And I did my best, and I started, I guess, got out enough noise to alert my parents. My parents came in my room, flipped on the lights, and were looking for me. And I'm trying to tell them where I was. Finally, they're like, holy shit, he's under the bed. My dad's trying to, the old mag light under the bed. And he literally had to pick the bed up, and my mom had to pull me out. And that's kind of the beginning of where the bad shit happens. And my dad would sit there and he was like, how the hell did you get under there? What were you doing? You know, and like I said, at the time, I mean, the bed frames, the bed railings and stuff weren't like they are today. You know, you didn't have 12 inches under your bed. You know, these are old school 70s, you know, bed frames. They were low. And I was trapped under there. You know, there was never an explanation. Basically, I was pulled back out and told to go back to sleep. Quit being stupid. Basically, that was kind of the start of bad stuff. You know, that was my intro into it's not fun. It's not interesting. It's not creepy. It's real.
Well, what's the next real thing?
The next real thing would be just the overall feeling. You know, it's just every time I'd be up in that room, it was not right. There was nothing right about it. You know, I'd be like, okay, I'll go to bed. You know, because back in the 80s, you didn't mess around with your parents. They told you to go to bed, you went to bed. They told you to stay in your room, you stayed in your room. You know, there was no discussion. So I would stay up there, but I could never sleep. And I would wait until everybody went to sleep in the house, and I would crawl across the floor with my blankets, and I would sleep in the middle of the hallway at the top of the stairs.
Oh, man.
Right in front of my parents' room and right, you know, catty-corner from my sister's room.
Every night?
Almost every night. Almost every single night. Sometimes I would crawl into my parents' room. I would sneak into their room and lay at the foot of their bed on the floor, which, you know, it doesn't really go over well with your parents. You know, they need parent time. And you're sneaking in there, you know, going to sleep on the floor, and they don't know you're there, you know, it causes issues.
You don't say.
Oh, I do say. But it was, but honestly, I literally probably would have slept at the top of those stairs forever and ever.
So
it never made me move.
It was basically just your room?
No. Now, we'll get to my father, okay? My father would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, kind of like a night terror, okay? Now, my parents never discussed this with us, you know, and said, this is what's going on, blah, 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 because you're kids, you know, your opinion doesn't matter back in the 80s. You know, it's what happens, we're adults, shut up, go back to your room type thing. But we did overhear them talking about it more than once. And my dad would have this recurring dream. It's kind of like The Shining, to where he said the walls would start bleeding and the ceiling would cave in on him. And he had this recurring dream quite a bit. There was quite a few nights to where we remember our dad screaming, and we would try to, you know, go in a room and they'd tell us to go away. But this was a recurring situation. Now, my sister's room, we're going to go around the rooms for you. My sister's room had stairs to the attic, but they were blocked off. These stairs were in a closet, but the ceiling was completely blocked off. There was no access. And my sister would use those stairs for storage, you know, to put her stuff. She would hang her clothes in there, you know, put her shoes, what have you, whatever teenage girls have. You know, she had another closet on the other side of her room, but she used, you know, the attic stairs a lot. And there would be many nights whenever I'd be sitting there with my sister, laying there with her, or, 'cause sometimes, I'd go and try to sneak in bed with her. And you could hear stuff. I mean, this, like I said, you can't, say it was one thing or another. It could have been rats. Could have been anything, but you would always hear scratching and you would always hear noises and what have you coming from those stairs all the time. Like it wasn't just every so often. It was every night. It got to the point to where I would sneak in my sister's room and I would try to go to sleep on the opposite side of her bed from where those stairs were. Like I wouldn't even try to get in bed with her. I would sleep on the opposite side. Because there was always some kind of noises going on from those stairs, creaking, scratching, some kind of movement. All the doors locked. Of course, they were kept locked. But that's kind of another little thing from that room. You ready to move on?
Yeah. One thing though, looking back, is there a reason to think that it in fact was some kind of a rodent? Was there any, droppings left behind, any scratch marks from a rat, anything like that?
And now you're asking questions that, you're talking about the 1980s. My father was a traveling businessman. My mom was starting a kennel. We had like 10 horses. You know what I mean? This wasn't stuff that was high enough on the to-do list to actually figure out.
Right.
We had rat traps everywhere in the house. It was an old farmhouse. Of course we had rat traps.
Right.
We had cats. I was allergic to cats. I swelled up like a balloon, but my mom insisted on having cats in the house. They didn't have access to that closet, but we did have, cats in the house, and I'm sure there were rats.
Yeah.
I'm sure there were mice. Like I said, you're talking about a 200-year-old house. It's going to have holes. It's going to have nooks and crannies that you don't know about, but the noises, here's the thing. Do rats make their stairs creak?
Not usually, no, unless it's a really huge effing rat.
And probably would have saw that one. You know what I mean? But that was the thing, with stairs would creak.
Yeah.
And it was scary enough to where we actually put a bolt lock. We basically bolt locked every door in that house. My parents never said why. And this is the part that makes it more sketchy. As my parents never would talk about this with us. They would never acknowledge it or anything else, but we had multiple locks on every door. You live out in the country. People in the country sleep with their doors open. We didn't.
Well, yeah, unless the rat was the size of like Master Splinter, then he's probably not going to be creaking the stairs, right?
And that's the thing. And the stairs went nowhere, though.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
The stairs went nowhere.
Yeah.
They went to the ceiling. That's where they went. So where are you walking to? And I remember, multiple times me sitting on the bed with my sister, and we're just both like kind of in the middle of the night looking, kind of holding each other and looking over at the stairs. My sister, I could get her on here in a heartbeat. She would freely admit and talk about any of this. It's not like some one person's hallucinations. We're going to get into that further as well. How many people this actually involved?
Well, yeah.
Way more than one.
Yeah, go right ahead. Keep going.
So we can move on from there. We can talk about the stair guy. You remember that picture?
I do.
We had this dude, and it's kind of like the corner of the eye thing. How we always talk about the corner of the eye. If you look at it directly, you're not going to see it. Out of the corner of your eye, you'll see it every time. And where we sat was our living room faced, our stairs, I told you, went in between the bedrooms up to the upstairs. There was a little landing from the living room into the dining room. in between the stairs, or on the opposite side of the stairs. And the TV was in the corner by that little landing. And this dude, he had scraggly hair, skinny and emaciated, kind of jagged teeth. And the only reason I know these details is because I saw him for years. You didn't see him directly, but you saw him enough out of the corner of your eye to determine what he looked like. And he would literally, we'd watch TV, and he would peek around the corner at us all the time. It got to the point to where we would actually throw kitchen utensils at the wall. Because it's kind of one of those things, you throw the kitchen utensil, you look over there, and he's not there anymore. You're like, okay, we won. You get back to watching TV. 15, 20 minutes later, corner of your eye, he's back while you're watching TV. And we would just chunk shit at the window. We would chunk shit at the wall all the time. There was marks in the wall. Parents weren't overly happy about it, but on the same token, I think they knew.
You think they saw him?
What's that?
Did you think they saw him?
Of course. Because if your kids are throwing shit at the wall and you're not mad at them and getting, they're not in trouble for it, why?
Right.
Like I said, my parents were no bullshit people. They straight open a can of whoop ass on you in a heartbeat. The wooden spoons would come out, whatever else, the switches would come out, the broom handle, whatever my mom could grab to whoop your ass with was what you got whooped with. They didn't play. But we never once got talked to or chastised or punished for throwing stuff at that wall.
What other details can you tell me about this little homie that was visiting you guys?
He would just simply come down the stairs. He would reach his right hand, and he would kind of grab the door frame, and he would sneak his head around and just look at us, like just peeking at us. And it wasn't really a malicious thing. You didn't feel threatened or anything. It wasn't comfortable, if that makes sense. He had like kind of a longish stringy hair. He was kind of like, what do I want to say? Like a Wendigo type thing. But maybe not quite as scary.
I don't know, Tony, that sounds kind of scary to me.
But
you saw him walking down the stairs?
No. You never saw him doing anything besides looking around that door frame.
Well, how do you know he went down the stairs?
He was on the stairs. He came from somewhere. You know what I mean? I don't know where he came from, but he would always look down. He would look around that door frame at you at the bottom of the stairs, the landing of the stairs that separated the living room, the dining room, and the upstairs.
Oh, my gosh.
There was a little elevated landing. I wish I could, draw it out for you.
Have your daughter do it. Remember the whole back and forth? Yeah. You're like, here's what I do, here's what my daughter does. That would be my situation.
My little artist.
That would be my situation too. But see,
basically, okay, let me lay out the bottom of the house to you. Okay, you walk in the front door. We had a covered porch in front of the front door. We had the kitchen. Okay, from the kitchen there was 3 doorways. The doorway to the right, if you walked in the front door, went to the family room. Okay, we had a living room and family room. The family room, which nobody used, with the nice furniture, that's where our gun cabinet was. Now, if you walk in the front door and go straight ahead through the door, that's the living room where the TV was. There was a little elevated landing where the stairs to upstairs went. So basically you went up 3 stairs. There was a landing. You went down 3 stairs, and there was the dining room. And the dining room was connected by another doorway to the living room. It was kind of like a big square. In the kitchen, if you went straight ahead toward the living room where we watched TV and kind of turned right, that was the door to the basement. So I'm kind of trying to set this up so I can show you guys for a later story. So basically, you walk in the front door. It was kitchen. To the right was the family room. Straight ahead through the doorway was the living room. To the right was the dining room, which attached to the family room. If I'm getting those right, I don't remember family room and living room. There was one you live in and one's for show, kind of thing, if I understand correctly.
Right.
So basically, all 4 rooms downstairs connected through a single doorway to each. So that's kind of how it sat. And then in the family room was a doorway to the porch, and that porch was where all the cardinals came and were smashing into the windows. So basically, the living room, you walk straight to the kitchen, and the living room was there. And to the entrance where the stairway and the dining room were is where the guy would come down and peek around the corner at us all the time. And like I said, it wasn't malicious. I never felt threatened. It was annoying. I don't know if that's the way it was designed to be, just to annoy you, to get a reaction out of you, but it always got a reaction out of us.
You never saw him anywhere else in the house?
Nope, just that one spot.
Why do these things always have scraggly, oily, greasy, disgusting hair?
And that was the only one in the house that looked like that, though. That was the only one. We're going to get into more.
Only one.
We're talking 1, 2, 3, at least 4 more.
Oh, you better keep going, man.
Okay, well, I'll try to move it along a little bit.
No, you're fine. it was kind of a joke because I'm like, holy crap. I mean, that was, you're like, oh no, the rest had better hair than this.
Well, 1 had no hair. 2 had no hair,
shit.
actually. And 1 I didn't see directly. I just kind of saw behind me.
Oh.
But basically, he was kind of one of the first ones that we noticed that was very, like I said, he was very annoying because we'd be sitting there trying to watch TV, and out of the corner of your eye, you could see him looking, and it was just so interruptive of everything. But it was never a threatening thing. It wasn't like, I'm here to kill you. It was just annoying. So it was just kind of like I said, it was just, you just get frustrated. Just go away. We're trying to watch Alf.
Oh, Alf. I remember that show. The good old days.
And that was the thing. We're just trying to watch TV, dude. Just come on, man. It wasn't like we were angry. It wasn't like we felt threatened. It was just like, come on. It's kind of like your little brother or little sister poking you. You're not really that upset about it, but stop.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's enough. And that was him. Now, where do we want to go from this? What kind of level do we want to raise it to at this point?
I mean, so far, so good.
Well, we'll do this one. Okay. Now, we'll do an outside the house thing. Okay. My best friend growing up. Okay. Whenever you live in the country, if somebody lives within like 2 miles of you, that's your best friend. Because that's pretty much your only friend. Okay. Now, my best friend, Rob, his mom was super religious. My dad was Catholic. I don't think my mom cared. But his mom was, I went to like 3 or 4 different churches growing up. Because she wanted us to go to this church, that church. They'd speak in tongues. They'd do this. They do that. They do all the scary shit. That kind of gets involved with, seriously religious people. And one day, we decided, my sister, I don't know where she got it, she went and got a Ouija board. Okay, now disclaimer is, I don't believe in Ouija boards. Even with everything that's happened in my life, I do not believe in them. I don't think they're real. Anything. Okay. But we had this Ouija board. And we got caught playing with this Ouija board by my friend's mom. She lost her shit. Completely lost it. We had a 55-gallon drum on her property, a burning barrel. She went out, she got gasoline, she got wood, she set that thing on fire. She threw that Ouija board in that burning barrel. Okay. Now, my friend's mom, she's still alive, and I guarantee you she will admit to this story. She threw that Ouija board into the burning barrel. Okay. Now, we will say what could have happened. That Ouija board shot about 30, 40 feet in the air, and it landed in the cornfield after she threw it in the fire. She looked at us and she said, never touch that thing again. Leave it where it's at. Don't ever touch it. Okay. Now, could a minor explosion happen in the burning barrel? Maybe there was a bottle in there. Maybe there was something flammable, explosive, what have you. I mean, I'm one of those people, like I said, I will take every, instance into, the explanation and look at it. I'll sit there and try to, figure it out for myself. But we saw that Ouija board shoot about 30, 40 feet in the air, land in a field. She told us never to touch it again. And we had brought it from my house. Could it have been some kind of incendiary issue? Of course.
Right.
Who knows what the hell was in that burning barrel? You know what I mean? But at the time...
Interesting timing, though.
That's a pretty convincing argument. Don't touch that thing. You don't know what it's capable of. It shoots in the air and lands in the field out of a burning barrel.
But who goes and picks it up?
Nobody. Never touch that thing again. It probably got farmed over and replanted.
Oh, she wouldn't even walk over and go pick it up to put it back in the burn barrel?
No, nobody was going near that.
Lesson
Nobody
learned.
was ever touching it.
Lesson learned.
And my friend, who I've had since I've been, 10 years old, 38 years, almost 40 years, he remembers these things. Okay. So that was just kind of a little aside as to the fact that things happened outside that household that were tied to that household that other people saw. Okay. Now we'll get to the ceiling guy. You remember that one?
I do.
He was the guy in my house. The only way into the attic was a ceiling tile that had to be pushed up and out of the way from underneath. So basically, you would have to get on a little miniature ladder, go up to the ceiling, and push the ceiling tile up and out of the way to get up into our attic, which I don't even know why we even went up there because there was nothing up there but the thatched roof or whatever. So basically, I would lay in bed. In the middle of the night, I would wake up, and I would see eyes staring at me. Okay. Part of me wants to remember them as red eyes. Could have been, could not have been. Maybe it was just, a child being terrified and, envisioning something. But this happened for years. This thing would just open up that ceiling tile in the middle of the night. Okay. The only way to open up that ceiling tile was from below, and I would just be terrified, hide under the blankets, what have you, and I would tell my dad in the morning. He would come in and tell me to quit messing with the ceiling tile. Because, like I said, it would be open. The only way to open it is from below. So we went through this for years. So my same friend, Rob, that has a religious mom, on a few times he actually would stay at my house, came over one night, and we had a plan. Whenever we see that sucker, I'm going to take a baseball bat and I'm going to hit it. So that was our genius plan at 10 years old, 11 years old, whatever we were, 12 years old. And so that night came, we laid in bed together, we stayed awake the whole night. Fell asleep at some point, woke up. The eyes were there. I jumped up, grabbed that bat, swang, and I hit something. and it made an extremely audible sound. Like basically you hit, instead of a baseball, you hit a tree trunk. It was a thunk, and it was a loud thunk. And I'm screaming and yelling, and he's freaking out, and my parents come running into the room. What the hell is going on? I was like, I got it. I hit with the bat. I got it. And of course my dad's pissed off. I just woke them up in the middle of the night, and he thinks, we're just kids having nightmares and fantasies, what have you. And he looks up and the ceiling tile's open. There's no marks on the ceiling. I didn't hit the ceiling. There was nothing else in my room I could have possibly hit to make that kind of sound. My friend Rob swore up and down this really happened. Of course, my parents blew it off. Or not so much my mom. She just kind of nodded and said, it's okay, what have you. And my dad kind of cussed at us and said, quit messing with the ceiling tile. There's nothing in here. My friend Rob never spent the night again at my house.
He never came over again? Like spend the night?
Ever. Well, he came over.
Goodness.
He would never spend the night.
Yeah.
I always, after that point for years, spent the night at his house.
Wow.
He never spent the night with me after that.
So he saw something.
Oh, he knew. He was still admitted.
Yeah.
And let me explain to you, Rob. Okay. Rob is a high-ranking officer in the military right now. He went to a very prestigious school. He's not a person that's driven to fantasy. He is a very level-headed, very serious-minded, straightforward person. Okay? Like I said, he is a high-level member of the officer corps in the military.
So
he has a job. I don't even know what he does. He won't even tell me what he does.
That means he's quite high up then.
He's up there.
Yeah.
We went to I went to the Air Force and he went to the Air Force Academy type thing. That was our paths in life. That's how close we were. As we went to the same military, we did the same kind of stuff. And honestly, he will, to this day, he even told my wife, he was like, this really happened. He's not making this up.
But what label would you guys give this thing, if any?
I mean, it was physically, able to manifest itself enough to where I could make contact with it. It never outwardly threatened me. I mean, maybe it's the thing that put me under the bed in the beginning. I don't know. But it was manifested enough to where we made physical contact, enough to where my parents woke up and heard it. Now, if you hit the ceiling with a bat, it's going to make a mark. If not, tear off some plaster or what have you. I don't remember what kind of ceilings we had. But you're going to know that you hit the ceiling. I mean, right or wrong. You're going to know. If it's audible enough that somebody from the next room with the closed door heard it, something was physical enough that you made a connection with it.
Right.
So as far as what this was, I don't know. I know it harassed me constantly for years. After that point, I don't think it came around as much. I don't think we heard it or anything else. I just think it was us maybe standing up to it, and saying enough is enough. We're not going to do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You're not scaring us. Now we're pissed. And this is kind of how the house played out. It got to the point to where you just became pissed off. You had enough. You're done being scared. You're done being chased. You're done being teased. It gets to the point to where that's enough. I've had enough. I'm pissed off now. I'm not scared of you. I'm mad. Leave me alone. And that's kind of where a lot of the things kind of died down in the house is whenever everyone just got sick of it. Everyone just got angry. Okay. Now, another smaller point. Okay. My father, who we already established wouldn't admit any of this, wouldn't speak about any of it, and wouldn't confirm anything. He had a priest. My father was a Catholic. He had a priest come to the house. The priest walked through the rooms of the house with his sage or whatever he had. I don't know. But he walked through the house blessing the house. I think he had a thing of holy water or something. And once he was done, he was headed out the front door. And he wrote K plus M plus B on top of the front door. I remember seeing it. That's the name of the Three Kings. And he wrote the year that he had blessed a house above it. And I remember my father asking him, he's like, would you like to stay for a cup of coffee? And I remember that priest looking him dead in the eye and said, I don't feel comfortable here.
Mm.
And he left. So if you want to speak about verification that something wasn't right there, here's a man who, I'm not a religious guy, but here's a guy who believes, undyingly in his faith, and doesn't feel safe in a house. So, you can take from that what you take from it. But looking back on that terrifies me.
Yeah, it's not a good sign. No.
Move on to the next story. With Rob, like I said, he was my best friend. We did everything together. And so one day, nobody's home, just me and Rob. And we're playing in a house, doing whatever we did. I don't even think we had it. I think actually we did have a console system. It was the Pong system. I don't know if you remember that, but it basically had a stick on each side that pushed a ball to the other guy, and you just had to keep going back and forth until somebody missed. But we had literally no entertainment in the house. We had Legos, Lincoln Logs, and basically Army Man, whatever we wanted to play with. We blew a lot of stuff up. We had access to fireworks and did a lot of retarded things with the fireworks. I know I shouldn't use the R word, but we did a lot of stupid things over the years with fireworks and explosives. Like I said, we lived on a farm. I grew up hunting. We had access to black powder. We did a lot of goofy things around the house. And one day we were just messing around the house, and we hear this noise from my parents' room. And it sounds like some kind of animal. And we just kind of look at each other and like, okay, sure. It's the middle of the day. We're not afraid. It's not dark out, So we go in my parents' room. And the old rotary phone, I'm sure you remember those. The old rotary phone is making animal noises. Okay. Some kind of weird, I can't really explain it to you. It was some kind of animal, God, I don't even know how to put it. It was just a bad sound. But it didn't sound human, and it didn't sound mechanical. That's why I kind of label it as like some kind of animal sound. And we're kind of just looked at each other and we're like, oh shit. So we run over to the phone and we unplug the phone from the wall. Okay, which technically takes any kind of electricity, because electricity ran through the phone lines back then for the phones. So basically it deactivates the phone. And we threw it on the bed. We went out of the room. We shut the door. We started playing something in my room. I couldn't even remember what. We started playing something in my room. Next thing you know, the phone starts making noises again. We open up my parents' door. It's still sitting on the bed, still unplugged. That was it. We were gone. Bolted down the stairs, out the house, out into the street, past the garage, looked up to my parents' window. We saw a chubby, bald face in the window, pulling back the curtains. And he had kind of, I don't want to say almond-shaped eyes. It wasn't like a gray or anything. But he kind of had very large eyes. And they were kind of football shaped, like narrow footballs, not as fat as a football, but kind of narrow footballs. Does that make sense? But his eyes, we could even tell from the distance that we were at. We were probably 40 feet away. They had like almost like reptilian slits where his cornea should be. And he was sitting there with the window, the thing pulled back, grinning at us. Just grinning and looking right at us. And we probably stood there for like 10, 15 seconds, like just petrified. And then we bolted. And we didn't come back until my parents came back.
So
we explained to them what happened. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead.
No, we explained to them what happened. Of course, they called us crazy. Said we were just imagining things. And that was the end of that.
I mean, if you
so
could,
you were talking about,
if you
were
could,
talking about one-offs.
yeah,
that's a one-off.
That is a very strong one-off, actually. Yeah, if you could see him in the window the way that you did, how tall would he be then, do you think?
Well, that's kind of hard to answer because my parents' bed, the way it laid, was like from my room, you would walk straight into my parents' room, and straight ahead of you against the wall was their bed, and their headboard, the head of their bed, I don't remember if they had a headboard, but the head of their bed was where that window was. So technically, he could have been standing on a bed, kneeling on a bed.
Right.
It could have been anything, and so there's no way to really judge or gauge, how tall it was. But I mean, it was a human-sized person. It was a human-sized head.
What about clothes?
Couldn't say. Basically, he had the curtain pulled back, and he was kind of peeking out. Like he pushed the curtain to the left, like kind of with your right hand. If you were to grab the curtain with your right hand and kind of look out the window, like to see something, that's where he was. And he was looking directly at us, just smiling.
Yeah, the grinning thing is quite interesting. This story reminds me a lot of John Paul Capice's demon entity, whatever the hell, football-shaped head, and, grinning, same thing. Kind of did a little wave, I think, but,
This is why I was blowing John Paul up that
day.
Because, some of the stuff that he covers, like I said, I'm not religious. I'm not bashing anybody's religion, beliefs. You can do whatever you want. It's just not my thing. But I do see references from some of the stuff that I've seen and some of the stuff I've dealt with established religion. And I'm getting ready to go into that with you. Okay. What this prompted my friend and I to do, like I said, we were both intelligent. We were both inquisitive. We were both studious and what have you. So we found, I don't remember what library we found it at. We found a Necronomicon. Okay. And some of the things that we had seen and experienced in that house were either explained or pictured. The thing we saw in that window was pictured in a Necronomicon. The person that was staring at us from the stairs was pictured in a Necronomicon. Not exactly, but close enough to where, you're like, okay, that's creepy. So I don't know how much you know about the Necronomicon.
Well, I mean, explain it to the folks that may not know so much about that.
It's kind of the it's kind of like the satanic, I can't even talk, satanic Bible. It's kind of like a compendium, demons, the kind of echelons of hell. It's an H.P. Lovecraft thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's called, I guess to be more simple, is the Book of the Dead. And it's wrapped in, criticism, and, it's kind of a work of fiction. But a lot of the pictures that we saw in that book really represented the things we saw. A lot of the drawings and sketches and stuff like that. A lot of the explanations, and, the things that they talked about were kind of things that we, dealt with.
And do you guys think that, looking back, considering the fact that you had, the Native American crossroads and you had the whole prohibition thing and the Helltown thing going on, but you also have these witches as neighbors. And they didn't hide it. Do you think it's an amalgamation of all those things or just one or the other? What do you think's going on there?
See, and that's where we get into the third thing where, we actually discussed this with John Paul, is there were electric lines, high tensile electric lines running over our property, which are purportedly responsible for causing hallucinations and situations like that. But I'm kind of with John Paul if on the kind of, I don't think so much that they are causing hallucinations. I think they're creating more of a gateway. I try not to sound crazy and be logical and, work with facts. But honestly, that's how I feel. Is that was creating gateways for whatever evil had happened in that area, for whatever bad memories had transpired. I just think it amplified things.
So they could use that as an energy source.
Use it as an energy source and maybe a gateway.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I fight with my wife about this. She's like, it's the power lines, it's this, it's that. And I'm like, you weren't there. You weren't terrorized for years.
Tony, was there also any water around there?
There was a creek, a pond not far away. But other than that, no, nothing substantial.
I'm not saying the power lines aren't enough, to help anything manifest or whatever it was. It was just a random question because of the fact that, especially that part of the country, there's usually all kinds of waterways and things going through there.
Well, there was a small creek. Yeah, I say creek. I'm from Southwest PA. But there was a small creek about maybe 200 yards from the house, and there was a small pond maybe 300 yards from the house. But nothing substantial to, be like, it's some kind of drawing point or what have you.
Right.
But on the same token is, what's kind of interesting is how we found, I told you we had a cistern. Well, we eventually ended up with a well. And how we found that well was my dad hired a diviner. And that diviner actually, did his cherry wood sticks or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And he found our well. We dug down and there it was. So, which kind of adds to like a little bit of the lore of the area. If that makes sense.
Oh, no. Well, yeah. And it plays directly into my previous question, right? So maybe
there was
water being
I guess, a substantial
present.
Water source below.
Yeah. Mm. And it would have been enough even without the whole dark practicing witches thing. But that, because you've heard me bring this up numerous times because it just has. It's come up and it's been relevant, is Patrick Meekin and his Holmes County, Ohio, and all that story, right? The Amish people were practicing some really dark stuff around that area. And that's why I brought up the animals and did you see any marks on trees or anything like that? But because he had the whole, that was running the gamut.
Well, we actually did deal with Amish people, believe it or not.
Really?
Well, because, the Amish for us were, almost 3 hours away that we dealt with. They were down towards Harrisburg, PA. But we did deal with the Amish people. We had the kennel we were starting up a kennel. We had the biggest kennel on the East Coast for quite a few years. And that was our claim to fame, kind of. And we actually used to go down to the Amish because I don't know how, but they used to get food and dog food and, just all kinds of silly stuff. And they would sell it to us for next to nothing. And it was actually enough of a deal for us to drive our custom van from Pittsburgh to Lancaster, PA, which probably did 3.5 hours. Load up a dog food and drive back. And I remember I was always creeped out by the Amish girls. And I was kind of a good-looking kid. You know what I mean? And my parents would always make me go down there. And those Amish girls would just look at me, and it was just kind of freaky. It was, I don't know, it just kind of bothered me. I don't know. They were so secretive and strange. You know what I mean? They were just like, I don't know, they were disconnected from everything, and it makes you think, like here now in the later years, is where did they have all the connections to get this stuff? They don't have electricity. They don't really have a social network outside of their area. So where did they get all this stuff to sell us?
Where do you think they got it, Tony? They got it from selling their souls to the devil. I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. Oh my goodness.
No, you're not.
It's like, I'm going to email you. I'm going to get you. I'm kidding.
It was really weird because, where were these people that have no ties to any kind of financial institutions or businesses or corporations? Where do they come up? He had this barn. And I remember walking into this barn, and he just had probably 3,000 pounds of dog food bags in the barn. He had because we bought everything. He had Slim Jims by the cases, fruit roll-ups by the cases, and then my parents would always buy us stuff like that. Cereal by the cases. You know what I mean? It's like, where do these disconnected people find all this?
Oh, they have their ways.
And then what makes it even more weird is, how did my parents that live 3.5 hours away by car travel find these people that were selling it? See, food for thought now.
So who bought the house after you guys? When did you move out?
Another story. We had the house on the market for 10 years. We literally sold the house at probably 35% of market value. The house sat on 10 acres, which is a substantial amount of property. It was a large house, 4-bedroom, 2 full baths, basement, barn, the whole nine. And we ended up, every time somebody would come to look at the house, they loved it, never bought it. Or if somebody actually wanted to buy the house, the deal fell through for whatever financial reason. So it literally took us 10 years to sell the house at probably 35% of market value.
Wow.
And I haven't even got to the good stories yet. I got 2 more stories.
Let's do it.
About that. All right, you ready? All right, let's do the gangbusters. Okay. Probably the most interesting story about the house was, second most, was we were cooking Thanksgiving dinner. Okay, my mom had the turkey in the oven overnight, cooking the turkey. We woke up the next day. The turkey bones were all throughout the kitchen. The oven was wide open. All the food was everywhere, smattered throughout the entire kitchen. And it wasn't like something just pulled the turkey out of the oven. It shredded the turkey. Completely destroyed it. And we ended up having to not have Thanksgiving dinner that day due to all the damage and what have you. I mean, we had to sit there and clean up the house for hours.
So the entire turkey was there. It was just in bits and pieces.
It's like basically if you throw a quarter stick inside the turkey, that's basically what it looked like.
And the
There was
oven's
turkey.
hanging open.
Oven wide open.
Still on?
Hmm? Yep, still on.
Now, going off previous stories, your parents were kind of like, oh, it's nothing. Come on, this is... But what did they say about this?
My dad, rats.
Rats?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Rats.
They frequently open oven doors.
And, destroy a turkey. They don't eat it. They just blow it up.
Yeah, and they just rip it up. They take their little paws and throw the bones around. What'd
Mm-hmm.
your mom say?
Nothing. My mom, like I said, my mom never said anything.
Yeah.
She literally never had anything to say about anything. There was always, like my dad, another little side story. I'm sorry, I keep getting these side stories. But
That's all right.
This crap happened in this house. Another little side story. My dad got into it with the neighbors, my mom and dad. And they threatened him. Of course, my dad, whatever, doesn't care. He was down in the basement to chop some wood. Okay, because like I said, we had a furnace. Okay, now the basement, I'll explain that to you real fast, was a solid stone basement. And I don't mean stone as concrete. I mean stone as in stone. Like literally made of layered stone. Basement. And the weirdest thing that I remember was it had a baby's footprints in the floor. There was no writing. I mean, it could be due to years. Maybe there was something written there. Maybe somebody put their baby's feet prints in there at some point. But there was one set of baby's footprints down in the basement, which kind of made it even more creepy. The basement wasn't that high. But the time my dad got into it with the neighbors, he went downstairs to chop wood. Next thing you know, he comes back upstairs gushing blood. He had somehow broken a piece off the axe, and it went straight, or the hatchet, and went straight into his stomach.
Mm.
Like to where like a piece of the metal actually broke off, which I don't understand chopping wood, how that could possibly happen. But it broke off and it went into his stomach, and he ended up having to go to hospital after an argument with the neighbors. So it was kind of a little side story about the basement, all the creepy shit that happened down there.
Mm.
The next to the last story I'll get to is I went downstairs. Our washer and dryer were downstairs. We had a ringer washer. I don't know if you remember those. But basically, it's an agitating wash tub that plugs in, and then you actually have a physical ringer washer. You have to take each piece of clothing, and there's a hand crank, and run it through the ringer. That's how country we were. And then we actually had kind of a modern dryer, and we threw it in the dryer. Well, one day, I was always in charge of going down into the basement and getting the clothes out of the dryer. Well, one day I was getting the clothes, and I'm already getting like weird chills. And I feel this sweep of cold air just like hit me. And I mean, it's not like a subtle thing. It's kind of like, it's subtle as in it wasn't like kind of a hurricane force wind. It was a subtle wind, but the temperature change wasn't subtle. Basically, it went from like 65 degrees to 30 degrees, and it just hit me in the back, and I felt it immediately. And instantaneously, I knew something wasn't right down there. So I'm grabbing the clothes, and it just keeps getting, more and more prevalent to where I can't ignore it. I don't want to look. I'm a kid. I'm already terrified. I'm already terrified of this house, over the house. And I look behind me, and what do I see? Nothing. So I kind of look up a little bit, and I see a robe. kind of like a robe that's like floating on top of the floor, probably by maybe 8 inches, 9 inches. And it was a flowing robe. It was a real robe. It was like some kind of thing in a robe was floating behind me. And that was it. I didn't look any further. I didn't try to see what it was. I grabbed the clothes and I ran upstairs. And it's kind of like, I kind of feel like by the robes and the floating robes, I almost feel like maybe it was death, you know, or something like that. I mean, who hovers with robes on, you know, throughout any kind of history? You know, if you have any ideas, let me know.
I mean, I'm still going to blame it on the witches. I don't know. I say they have something to do with that.
You think so?
I don't know. I really don't.
I didn't know either.
It's just your property there has so much going on, right? So you got water, you got electricity, you got witches, you got Helltown. It's a lot.
We had animals dying left and right. And that was one thing I totally forgot about until you actually just kind of spurred my memory.
Well, let's talk about that because that's important.
Well, we had, you know, we were starting the kennel. Like I said, you know, we had started with 2 dogs, went to 4 dogs, 6 dogs, 8 dogs, you know, what have you, and just started going down the line. And I remember we had a lot of animal deaths, you know, but see, I don't sit there and think about that because maybe it was due to inexperience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we didn't know how to raise animals properly. You know, I mean, there wasn't the internet to look back on. It was, you know, if you did research, you got to go to the library and hope that whatever book was there, you know, but I do remember we had a lot of animal deaths, and I remember my mom being frustrated, you know, and it got to the point, you know, before I get to my last big story, it got to the point to where my mother, she said, I've had enough. I will never live in a used house again. And because at one point we had actually considered moving the house off that hill, you know, which I don't know if you know, but that entails a lot of work.
A ton of work. So for them to admit that it may not be the house, but the land, that says a lot.
Yeah, we were going to move the house at one point. I guess my parents had looked into, you know, how much it would cost because we ended up buying 150 acres about 10 miles away, 12 miles away. And, you know, my parents had looked at one point about moving the house instead of building a new house, you know, moving that house, how much it would cost, you know, because you have to move power lines. You know, there's a lot involved in that. And my mom said that she didn't want to live in a used house ever again. So we built a brand new house. So, I mean, if that doesn't speak volumes as to what was going on there, then I don't know what does.
Right.
But if you have any questions, go ahead and fire them before I ask this last one.
No, go right ahead.
I know I've kept you on here forever.
No, you're doing awesome. I love these stories. Go ahead.
So basically, the big kicker to the house was my father was a traveling salesman. Okay, for a high-rated, you know, AAA better beer business company. You know, he had a pretty good job, but he would be gone for like 2 or 3 days. He would have to go from Pittsburgh clear to Altoona, PA, Bedford, PA. You know, he had a very, very large sales territory. So he'd be gone for days. So one night, my mother, my sister, and I were at the house, and we noticed a thumping at the basement door that came up into the kitchen. Okay. Just to give you perspective, the front door, if you were to stand at the kitchen sink with your back toward the kitchen sink, the front door that I explained earlier was to the right. The family room was straight ahead and to the right. The living room was directly to the left. And straight ahead of you was the basement stairs that went down to the basement. We had 2 locks on that door. One was a bolt lock, and the other one was a hook and latch, a large hook and latch. So one night, we're in a kitchen, and the door starts thumping. Kind of like not knocking, but kind of instead of knocking with your knuckles, if you were to take the back of your hand and thump on the door, thump, 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 type thing. So we're freaked out. Somebody's in the house. Okay. Now, to give you an idea, we had the gun cabinet and we had many guns in it. But to get to that gun cabinet, you had to go past that kitchen door. Or you had to go past the basement door. Make a right, make a left, and go into the living room to get to, or the family room to get to the guns. Okay. So we're stuck over by the sink. So the thumping gets worse. And we're just stuck there. I mean, I don't think we even talked, to be honest. And the thumping got worse. And now it's beating on the door. Like beating on the door, like more than the back of its hand, it's kind of coming into the door now. And it got progressively worse. Now the door is visibly shaking. Boom, 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 boom. Like somebody's coming in the house. We're like, oh shit, what are we going to do? I remember we all grabbed utensils and knives out of the drawers. Terrified. What's going on? Now, this progressively got to the point. Okay. We're sitting there terrified, me, my sister, and my mom. We're terrified. We can't get to the guns. We're stuck there. We're alone. My dad's not home. And this thing is beating on the basement door. It started cracking the wood. It started buckling the wood. Like somebody was literally taking their shoulder or kicking into the door. Literally that vicious. And like basically like the police are breaking into a house. So it kept going on. We're stuck. We're petrified. We can't move. We're not talking. We're just standing there with whatever we had in our hands, just petrified, praying for something to happen. Boom, boom, boom. Next thing you know, the bolt lock snaps off the door. Completely sheared off. The wood's starting to crack. Big time on the door. Whatever it is coming in. You can't stop it. It's happening. We're going to have to fight whatever it is. We're either going to die or we're going to have to fight it. And it just kept happening and happening. We're terrified. We're all crying. You know, the door's splintering. The only thing holding that door was that hook latch. The only thing holding that door was that hook latch. Right as that door started caving in, we saw headlights. Remember I told you we lived on top of the hill.
Right.
We knew when somebody was coming. We saw the headlights. They swung past and to our right, which means my dad was pulling into the driveway. Stopped completely. Just absolutely 100% stopped. My dad came walking in the house. Looks at us. We're standing there with whatever makeshift weapons we had in our hands. Totally confused. What the hell? We're freaking terrified. There's tears running down our eyes. We're freaking out. You know, we're trying to tell him what was going on. He looks over at the basement door. The door's shattered. One little hook latch holding it. So he's like, okay. He walks into the family room, grabs a gun, hands me a gun, and says, don't shoot me. So he walks over to the basement door. Like I said, my dad has balls. I'm not going to lie. I'll give him that. He had balls. Walks into there, grabs the mag light, whatever flashlight we had. I think we had those. Remember those old flashlights that had those gigantic batteries?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think probably one of those. And he proceeds to go down into the basement. And he tells me to follow him. If anything moves, shoot it. Don't shoot me. That was his words. And we go down into the basement. We go to the right. To the right is a dead end. It is just stone, a stone area. I think we added like a chest freezer, maybe some storage. To the right of that was a crawl space underneath the floor of the house. So maybe 2 feet high. Nothing in there. You could see from end to end, flashing this flashlight. So go back on the other side. There were 2 entrances to the basement. One was the old coal chute where they used to dump the coal room, I guess. And there was a metal storm door on the other side. Both of those doors were locked from the inside. There's no way that you can get out of that door and lock that door. It's locked from the inside of the house. So we go over to past the furnace, over by the coal door. My dad looks at it. It's locked. He opens it up, shines a flashlight in the coal room, because yes, we still had coal delivered for our furnace. Nothing's in there. Locks the door back up. We shine a flashlight around the laundry room area that we had and everything else. I'm sitting here pointing like you guys can see me. But he's flashing the flashlight everywhere, every corner, every nook and cranny, under everything, behind everything. We cleared that entire basement like a military expedition. We go over to the storm door, the metal storm door, still bolt locked from the inside. Came back upstairs. My dad looks at the basement door, just in tatters. And I honestly think that's whenever my dad decided it's time to go. But it was terrifying. I mean, we thought we were dead. Whatever was coming through that door was coming. Yeah, I don't think whatever it was, if my dad had not come home, I don't think we could have stopped it. I'm getting all emotional now. I'm like, ugh. I don't think we stopped it.
Do you think that it would have been, and this is complete conjecture, but do you think it would have been one of the other entities that you had already seen, or is this something just so different because of the mannerisms it was projecting before, your dad came home?
Well, now I am completely full of goosebumps, but it was different. It was different. Whatever this was, it was the real deal. Whatever the soul of that house was, that's what it was. It came for business. That was it. I don't know what pertinence my dad had, what difference he would have made to the situation. Okay, say he came in the house and the thing was crashing through the door, it already crashed through the door. What difference is he going to make? What are you going to do? But this is one of the things that, I do remember completely with clarity. My sister remembers, and it was kind of like the turning point. It was, we got to go. Enough's enough.
And how long did you guys stay there after that?
We sold the house like within months. Like I said, we sold it like probably 35% of market value. My parents probably lost bucket loads of money on the house.
Oh, because it had already been for sale at that point. It was just...
It had been for sale for at least 8 years.
Yeah. Well, thank God that the timing worked out a little bit better at that point, right? I mean, yeah, they lost money, but they were like, let's get the hell out.
Yeah, and honestly, see, and here's the thing. The thing is whenever we built a new house and we moved to the new house, I never felt uncomfortable at all, ever. And see, this is what makes me believe there was something there. There was something on that hill, something in the house, something in that area, because I never had a problem sleeping. I never had a problem being in my room alone. And you can't just go from, and I'm talking, I was past grade school at this point. You're talking about a teen, whatever. This isn't characteristic behavior, for somebody that old to be terrified to sleep in their own room. So That's since then, I've had night terrors. Part of them are the old hag, which I never knew there was an old hag thing until I started listening to podcasts and, delving into a lot of things. Your podcast, a couple others, kind of brought the old hag about. I never knew the old hag. I've discussed this to my wife before, some of the things I see, because she's heard me screaming, what have you. And I try to explain to her why I was screaming. Part of it's PTSD, due to my prior jobs in my life. I have certain PTSD moments, but part of it is honestly the old hag. And I don't know if it came from that house or it's a byproduct of that old house, or, it's just some kind of psychological thing that follows you along the way. But that's pretty much my story.
Who took possession of the house after you guys?
No idea.
Yeah.
No idea. Didn't care. It took me nearly 20 years to drive past the house.
And how did it feel once you did?
My daughter's mother, we went back, one time, and she begged me to, because we were living in Vegas, Pennsylvania's kind of a little bit of a hike, begged me to drive past the house, and I was like, no, hell no, I'm good. My wife that I'm with now, we've been together 13 years. It took her probably 10 of those to get me to actually drive up that road past that house.
Mm-hmm.
The house looks peaceful and it looks happy.
And it
but
could
the
be.
House always looked. What's that?
Yeah, I said it could be. For
the house always looked
anybody
peaceful
new.
and happy.
Oh.
I mean, they refaced the house. New siding, new roof,
Mm-hmm.
all the upgrades, what have you. So of course the house is going to look better. But honestly, I can't bring myself to stop because I'm terrified. Whatever is in there is going to be like, okay, here he is. Let's go get him. Let's follow him. And I never want to deal with that again. That situation where it was actually busting through, the basement door, that was a real situation. Those are real wood chunks. That door was actually buckling. My dad could not downplay that. He couldn't, explain that away. You have two access doors to the basement. Both of them are locked from the inside. They're still locked. Nobody's downstairs. Who did it?
So even today, he will not discuss that particular incident.
Never happened.
Never happened.
Never happened. You're just foolish.
But it was enough to where he was like, okay, yeah, thankfully it's getting sold. We're going to move. There was no like, hey, maybe we should stay here. This is a great place.
Never.
Yeah.
It was time to go.
Well, at least there's that. I mean, that had to be some validation to where your dad was like, look, we have land. We have a great house. Like, why do we want to move? Granted, it was on the market for a long time, but.
Honestly, the validation was, here was my validation with my father. Okay. Not just the night terrors and all the stuff that happened to him that he refused to acknowledge, that we sat there and woke up for. Not even that. The validation with my father was the time the priest came to the house. And my father asked him to sit down and have coffee. My dad freaking drinks coffee from the time he wakes up till the time he goes to bed. It could be 110 degrees, 80% humidity. My dad's drinking coffee. Coffee or whiskey, scotch. And that's just that day that my father asked the priest to sit down and have a cup of coffee with him. And the priest looked at him and said, I don't feel comfortable here. And my dad watched him walk through that door. That was validation. My validation point. Here's this guy that my father had broken down. My father can fight everything. He can deal with everything. He's old school. He doesn't need any help. But he actually broke down enough to have a priest come in. Bless the house that, of course, nothing's happening in. There's nothing going on in here. I'm just going to have the house blessed. Who does that? And the look on his face whenever that priest walked out that door, that was my validation. I mean, maybe not at the time, but looking back at it now, that's validation.
Right. How far are you from that house now?
What's that?
How far are you from that house now?
Probably about 45, 50 minutes, somewhere around there. That's down freeways.
Right.
So
I wonder how much that land is parceled out because, back in the quote-unquote day, it seemed like people owned more land at the time. And now people own an acre or 3 acres or 4 acres, whatever it might be. So I just wonder, what the neighbors are like, around that house, how much land they own.
Well, honestly, whenever I drove past the last time, we'll just get this out of the way. I wasn't stoked about driving past in the first place. My wife talked me into it. She wasn't my wife at the time, and now I don't know why I married her because she made me do this. But she made me drive past the place. No, seriously, this was like totally against everything inside of me. She kind of goaded me into it. She knows my personality, And I drove past the place, and honestly, driving up the hill and driving back down the hill, everything looked the same. Like the properties looked the same. Maybe some of the woods were cleared out a little bit more.
No added houses, not a lot of cars.
No, there weren't any more houses.
Yeah.
Like everything kind of looked the same. Like the same parcels, maybe cleared out a little bit more for farming. But like I said, then she did bring up, she says, oh, look at those power lines. There was a huge power plant next to my neighbor's house, probably within 200 feet of the witch's house was a huge power, relay system. And there was this big, huge lines running from there over top and what have you. And, that's whenever the conjecture came that, that was probably due to power lines. I read about this, I know your story, so I looked into it. I think it was just power lines. I'm sorry, but 10 plus people don't witness the same things because of power lines. Doors don't get broken down because of power lines. Ovens don't get opened up. Turkeys don't get exploded. This doesn't happen. I understand the whole power line thing. I completely understand, and I do agree with part of it. But the physical things don't happen. Maybe the mental things, but the physical things don't happen.
Do you think that if you were a witch, a dark witch, that you would seek out property that might be really in proximity to power lines because it might amplify what you were doing?
And that I don't know how long they were there. I almost said their last name. I don't know how long they were there. But just by the local, the way the locals are, I would guess that their family, I guess that they had been there quite some time. They had a single story house. They had a ranch house, which probably, I don't think ranch houses were really a thing between, before the 50s or 60s, maybe. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm totally uneducated as to when architecture happened. But, I would guess like 50s or 60s whenever ranch houses became a thing. Because it was a semi-modern ranch house. So, I mean, even at that time, you're talking 40, 50 years. And who's to know? I mean, maybe there was an old house there. They demolished it and rebuilt a new one. I don't know. I don't know the history of the area. And honestly, I kind of left there and never looked back. I don't really have an interest because it's, I'm not there anymore. I'm done. I don't have to live with that. And I don't care kind of thing. I know that sounds maybe kind of, I don't know. I guess maybe some people care more if something affected them this much, but I just don't want it in my life.
No, I don't blame you. That was a lot to go through.
Yeah, I don't want it following me. That's why I was so mad about having to drive past that house. I was like, what if something attaches itself to me and
Right.
now I have to deal with the shit again?
Right. Well, especially when, the thing with the eyes and it's in your room and then you're sleeping in the freaking hallway. That was like your reprieve. I mean, come on.
Oh, and I missed something. I missed the one shining star about the house. And this is actually something I had I hope you don't mind me going back. We got
No,
time for
go
that?
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this is actually something I had a huge question about. If anybody has ever experienced this, okay? Now, in my room, I told you all the bad shit that happened, okay? I had a guy. I don't know if it was a guy. It's so hard to explain. Do you remember what flea stacks were from back in Land of the Lost?
Of course.
It kind of reminded me of a flea stack, but it was like a human flea stack. If you can put those two together, like a human that's a flea stack. And he was completely white. And I mean like bone white. He was white. Not see-through white, glowing white, just kind of a bone white, like somebody that had never had a tan in their life and never seen a sun ray. And he would come out of my closet. He had no hair. He had no clothes. I do not remember if he had genitalia. I don't think I looked. But he was white, completely white, smooth skin, no hair. And he would come out. And this is one of my biggest questions that anybody's ever experienced before. He would come out of my closet and he would talk to me. He would move his hands, like kind of like an Italian moves his hands while they're talking, like they're trying to explain something. But there was never words, never any distinguishable words. There was no sound. It was kind of like a old movie, silent movie playing. And he would come out of my closet and he just reminded me of a flea stack, in retrospect, just because the slow movements, his body type, his bone structure, what have you. But he was definitely human. He wasn't like some kind of reptilian or anything. But every time this dude would come out of my closet, nothing would happen. This is like probably one of the most important things. I totally almost missed it. But nothing would happen. I would go to sleep and I would sleep in my bed that night and nothing bad would happen to me. Every time this guy came out of my closet. And it's not like he opened the doors and came out of he just simply appeared out of my closet. I never saw him coming out of my closets. I would wake up and he would be at the foot of my bed. And he would be moving his hands kind of like slowly, that's why I kind of attributed him to a flea stack.
Right.
Just a movement, super slow, just kind of like he was trying to talk to me.
Did you ever say anything to him?
Many times. I would try to talk to him, ask him who he was, what he wanted, if everything's okay. And it was never one sound. And it was almost like, kind of like, oh, Jesus, I should know the terminology for this. Kind of like whenever you talk about a residual spirit, not an intelligent spirit, maybe, but maybe something residual. It was almost like he was going through the same routines whenever he would come out. It was never anything different.
Except the difference was that nothing bad would happen to you when he would come out.
I was not afraid of him at all. And nothing bad would happen to me. I would actually sleep in my own bed that night and wake up the next day. Nothing bad. The guy in the attic never came out. Nothing bad happened.
What the hell?
And see, that was one of my huge things that I wanted to ask the last time we were talking was, what is that? Who was he? Why? Why was it whenever he was there, nothing bad happened? Why was I at peace with him? Dude, if right now, if it was nighttime and some white being can walk out of my closet and stood at the foot of my bed and tried talking to me, I would probably freak the hell out.
You would lose your shit, as
Exactly.
would most of us, right? But
Yeah,
you just knew. You knew that he was good somehow.
And that was the thing, is that was the one. I'm so glad you kept me talking, because that was one of the main things that I so want somebody to answer. Have anybody ever experienced something like this? To where this being comes out and everything's okay. It's a sense of peace. I'm okay. I'm protected.
He's like the peace amongst the chaos. Everything else was. You said the house was a nightmare. You weren't kidding, man. I didn't know the details, so I'm just getting them now. To want to sleep either in the hallway or, in a parent's room, which is not abnormal. But to say that the hallway was your reprieve, that's really sad.
That was probably, I would say, 60% of the time that I slept was in the hallway. I don't know why I felt safer in the hallway. I mean, the hallways where the freaking picture stairs were.
You're right, with the moving eyes.
Yeah, but for some reason, it just felt not as dangerous as, and that's another thing I was going to tell you about my dad's den. Whenever I go in my dad's den, I felt like there was something, evil there. I just felt like there was something in that den that didn't want you there.
But
so I never went in my dad's den.
Tony, what about, so these nights that you would see this man, right, and nothing bad would happen, what was the difference on those days? Or what was, did you say something or do something that day? Or was it a certain day of the week? Or was it once a month? Or the moon was up in the sky? What was it? Anything that you could put your hand on?
It was completely random. It was never predictable. It was never a certain time. There was never a certain moment. I could live in terror for 5 days in a row, and then all of a sudden here he comes, and then he comes for the next 4 days in a row. And then bad shit starts happening.
So if you saw him, you knew you were good for that very night. Nothing more. I
was good. Yeah, I was good. I felt good enough to where I could actually fall asleep. And that's why I said, I hope that somebody listening has had some kind of experience toward that may be able to explain it. I don't know. It was just, he was the savior, for whatever reason, whatever purpose. I mean, he was there to make sure that I was okay, and that's kind of another thing, another little thing that we kind of skipped over that I planned on saying something to you is, because of those power lines, I don't know if I felt like this, but I would often go out at night and take walks, which is probably pretty strange for a child, but I would walk at night a lot. And I always felt, as goofy and silly as this seems, that I could take power from the light of the stars and the light of the moon. Like I was literally energizing, absorbing power from those things. I know how silly and insane that sounds, but I do directly remember that whenever I was a child, like actually feeling like I was absorbing power from being out at night, but then it makes me think of the power lines. Well, maybe I was absorbing power.
Right.
But that was kind of like one of my things too. And usually whenever I felt kind of powered up like that and kind of really things didn't happen to me, less things would happen to me. I'll just put it that way. But this was, I've looked at all the explanations, the power lines. I had a teenage sister, which is attributed to what?
Poltergeist activity.
Poltergeist activity. You know what I mean? But I don't remember her being angry or in angst or anything like that. Maybe she was.
We hide it very well, Tony.
It's one thing I would actually try to understand what happened with my old house before I tried to understand what happened with women.
That's right.
So,
it's easier to explain.
Wisdom is great whenever you get older. But no, it's just, just the conglomerate of things that go on. And, like that house is for real, and anybody can sit there and downplay it, say I'm crazy. That was just happenstance. But I'm sorry, but at least 10, 12, 15 people in my life witnessed these things. They all lived it with me, and most of them to this day will sit there and say, yeah, that was real. So to me, that was real, and I feel for anybody that has to deal with shit like that.
Sounds like we need to drive down, knock on the door, and say, can we just spend a couple nights here, see what's what, maybe a couple Ouija boards. Who knows?
Here's my deal for you. Okay. I'll send you the address. You can go spend a couple nights, and you can tell me how you feel.
I would do it in a heartbeat if they would allow it.
I'm not. I refuse. There was too much bad shit.
You wouldn't go in there?
Hell no. No.
What if we had an army? We had an ITF army.
Don't care. No. I refuse to feel like that again.
I don't blame you a bit.
The whole smashing of the basement door and the whole that was it. I'm not doing that again. Hell no. And then to have whatever happened in Vegas, that feeling, no, I'm good. If you want to go play with that shit, go ahead. I'm at peace. I'm happy. Nothing in my house moves. Nothing in my house appears. I have no strange lights. My doors aren't buckling. I'm good. There's certain things. I'm not a chicken. And what's funny is like I can't go to scare houses now. Because believe it or not, one of the biggest scare houses, what's called the scare house in the country, one of the biggest haunted houses, was one street down from where I live. I won't even go because there is literally nothing that terrifies me. There is no haunted house I've ever been in that frightens me. It's kind of ruined a part of my life. You know what I mean? Because like everyone wants to go to these haunted houses and everyone wants to have fun and everything else. I just kind of walk through. Something comes out, I just look at somebody and I'm like, okay.
So the fact that you mentioned zip code 15666 is not a problem, right? Like that's general enough. That doesn't bother you. And the whole Demon Hill thing, because it's not maybe 100% corroborated, doesn't bother you. But
I'll say I lived on Schultz Road. I don't care.
Well, don't say that if you don't. Are you sure?
I don't care.
I can cut that out. I mean, I was just going to say, you can send me the address. I would love to do a little background check on it. Whatever limited, probably, resources I have. But, okay, so Schultz Road? You want to throw that out there? All right.
Don't care. I mean, it's where I was. It's not a lie. It's not bullshit. I'm not making things up. You know what I mean? So why should I be embarrassed to say where I was?
No, you shouldn't be embarrassed. It's just I get why you're, people go, hey, I don't want people harassed. I don't want people to, I totally understand that. But, all right, well, this is not the end of this for you and I, because I would like to corroborate a little bit more and see what we can find out. I mean, thanks for finally coming on and telling all your stories. It's been a long time coming now.
Well, thanks for having me. I mean, this is something I haven't shared other than close friends or family, in 35 years. So it's kind of a big deal. And I'm one of those people, like I told you, my background. I'm a logical person. I'm one of those people that if I can't see it, what have you, I will try to downplay everything and try to logic it out to a reasonable explanation. And this isn't something, I like talking to people about because I sound like I'm insane.
Welcome to the club, buddy. Welcome to the club. You're in the fold now, basically.
And that's why I was harassing you, because it's like, God, I've wanted to come out for so long.
Yeah.
I've wanted to share these stories and wanted to share my, life experiences with people, because You know, maybe somebody will have an explanation. Maybe
Yes.
somebody it'll help somebody out. Be like, okay, well, you know, I just went through the same shit. He got through it. He's fine.
Right. Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
Because it's terrifying. It sucks. You know, I was probably 8, 9 years old. I was still wetting the bed. You know, and that's not something to be proud about.
Yeah, but guess what? That's okay to say, because when you're going through the kind of shit that you were, right? Like, how else are you going to process that stuff? You can't. You're too young.
And you have parents that are telling you that nothing's wrong.
Right.
It's your imagination.
Right. Because
But then you
they're
have the same
trying to
parents
calm you
that are
down.
having their own, you know, my dad was having those night terrors.
Right.
My dad never had a night terror again in a new house. I mean, granted, the new house was like 7,000 square foot. Maybe I couldn't hear him, but
Damn.
you know,
That's a
yeah.
big house.
Yeah, we did well with the dogs. 150 acres, 7,000 square foot house.
Jesus.
But it's maybe I couldn't hear him screaming. I'm pretty sure I could have.
You could have heard him.
You know, yeah, I'm sure.
A man
but he
screaming
never-
is not, it burns into your soul.
And that's part of the thing is he had those night terrors in that house for the entirety of the time that we lived there.
Right.
And as soon as we moved, he never had them again. I never had another problem sleeping again. You know, so you can sit there and say, you know, it was all paranoia, it was psychosis, it was this, it was that, but it wasn't. You know, there was something wrong.
I'm going to get you to go back in that house someday. We'll go in that
No.
house. We'll go in that house, Tony.
Look, me, you, and Sean, we can go to them caves. I will put that on. Okay? We can go out Sasquatch hunting, but I'm telling you right now, if we see one up close, you better be able to run faster than me. Okay?
Especially
Because
if
I'll
it
be
has
out.
a human face.
I'm out. Okay? Dog man, we sit there and talk about that, I'm out. Okay? We can do all these things. I will do all these things. I will not walk back in that house. Not. I promise you. That's how cemented and serious it is in my mind. I will never in my lifetime walk back in that house. Not once. I don't care who's with me, what equipment you have, what protections we have, anything else. I will never, ever, ever walk back into that house.
What if it's with Zach Bagans and he writes you $1 million check to go back in the house?
Out.
You're out.
Not worth it. No.
I didn't mean to sound callous. That just proves the fact that what you went through was very legit.
I won't. I simply won't. I mean, I will sit there. If we did run into Bigfoot, okay, and I have no choice and I can't run, I will fist fight Bigfoot. I don't care. We're in a rock and roll. I mean, I'm always strapped, you know.
You better
But
have a
I'm
big
telling you
gun,
right
dude.
now, we can go hand to hand. I'll go hand to hand with Dog Man. He's going to beat my ass. But I will never walk back into that house. Won't. You know, and you can take that for what it is. You know, bullshit, or I'm just, you know, talking big or whatever else.
Oh,
But
no. I'm only giggling and bringing it up because it just reiterates the fact that that house was really screwed up. So, no,
yeah. And I want to know what happened in the house. What was so bad?
Right.
And if you look within 20 miles of where I grew up, the house I grew up in, there are so many haunted properties.
I'm sure.
That you can find online. There was actually an abandoned house down by a creek, probably maybe 2 miles from my house. It's called Jacob's Creek. But there was actually an abandoned house down there that we used to go down and fuck around in. Sorry. Stop that phone. You can edit that out.
Hey, no. It's pirate time. Don't worry.
I'm having such a hard time, like, not being a trucker. But there was this house, and the story behind the house, it's kind of one of those local legend type things, was the mother had children, these babies, and she buried them under the floorboards of this house. And we used to mess around and go down by this house all the time because that was a big fishing hole for us. We were always down there fishing. And you could literally go down to that house and hear what sounded like babies crying inside that house, like at night. And it took them, they never demolished that house for so many years. And we would actually go down there and take, we're like 16 years old, taking our beers down there. 4% beer at 16 years old, that's like moonshine. So we would sit out there and just wait and listen. And we actually had the balls to go in that house at one time. And I understand, I can totally picture how this happened, but there was actual red footprints that ran across the floor, up one wall, across the ceiling, down the other wall, and then back into the other footprints. And I understand you could actually do that. You could have like some kind of fake foot and dip it in paint and do that. Or you could actually take your friend and hold them upside down, and have them run across the walls. But there was all kinds of satanic symbols on the walls.
Right.
And there was actually footprints around that place, which is pretty cool. Whenever you're a kid, that's all you need.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I know it's been a while coming now, so thank you so much.
No, you don't have to thank me. This was awesome. You don't understand that what you provide is sometimes what other people need. And sometimes we don't want to be viewed as crazy. We just want to, tell our story and be like, we're not bullshitting. This isn't some fantasy that happened to us. This is the real deal. And we would just want, to get it out and people to hear it and maybe give us some answers. Not that there's any answers, but it'd be nice to get one or two.
That it's the eternal chase, right? No, and Tony, thanks again for coming on, and of course for spending any money on me and being one of my Patreons.
I don't spend money lightly. You deserve it. You're great. Your voice is great. Your personality is great. You make people feel comfortable. You make people feel, that they can just talk. Not feel judged, not feel, obligated to adhere to any kind of standards or anything else. And I mean, that's why I chose you. I could have went on a million shows. I listened to, I don't even know how many podcasts. You basically won me over. You were the person I wanted to talk to. I waited for months to talk to you, and I'm happy that you had me on. I'm happy you waited for me. So,
man, thank you so much. That means a lot. Thank you.
Well, wait till I go on vacation and you, Sean, and I go in search of the damn cave. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, he needs to come back out here. I would do that in a heartbeat. I was talking to him about doing that very thing, so I'm sure he would come back out here to do that.
He was just talking about it the other day. I was just texting him the other day.
All right.
I will go on vacation and come out there and we'll do it.
Well, maybe we need to create a group text and actually get some dates in mind, because I would 100% be on board with that.
And like have some people video it, and that would be freaking fantastic.
We have to do that.
My tent spreading.
Just in case something
I'm
happens.
a survivalist. I got survival gear. I'm ready.
And we have guns. So there you go.
And we have lots of guns.
We have guns. So. That's all that matters. Well, sometimes.
All right. Well, it's been fantastic, Shannon. I really appreciate it.
Thanks,
I've waited
Tony.
quite some time, and it's definitely been worth it.
Well, and we'll be talking soon, of course.
Yeah. Take care of those birds.
All right, man. Thank you so much.
All right, Shannon. You have a great night.
You guys too out there.